Welcome to our wonderful teachers. Since 1917, Benson has been providing effective handwriting instruction for teachers and students in Texas. We are very excited to support you in your handwriting instruction. Lewisville's handwriting program includes kindergarten through third grade, slant and cursive in both English and Spanish. So, what are the top reasons handwriting is not taught in a classroom? Teachers say it really boils down to time. They simply can't fit it into their day. And many teachers are worried that they aren't going to be able to undo the bad habits that students already have, especially when it comes to grip formation. And we know that of 1/3 of our teachers that were surveyed say teaching handwriting is often left up to the individual teacher. And this creates a lot of copying expense. And as students progress from grade to grade, it means there's a lack of consistency in handwriting instruction, and it simply isn't good for our students. So, although technology is increasingly taking up more and more of our students' days, the reality is that elementary students spend the majority of their day doing pencil and paperwork. We also know that high stakes tests include handwritten components. And of course, fluency in handwriting is going to help students transfer their thoughts to paper. And we know that illegible essays impact scoring as well. And quite simply, children who struggle with handwriting are going to struggle with writing, and they're going to avoid it as much as possible. So, writing by hand strengthens the learning process. The research behind it tells us that our brain receives feedback from our motor actions the very second the pencil touches the paper. Research has shown that the learning process may actually be weakened if we don't teach handwriting. Typing on a keyboard, well, that simply does not have the same impact as physically gripping a writing instrument. MRI studies and neural research have confirmed that handwriting instruction is connected to learning to read. Research also shows that cursive handwriting is a sensory motor activity and it builds brain development and language fluency. The simple physiological motion of writing in cursive creates new pathways into the brain, and mental effectiveness is improved. PET scans have proved that the actual structure of the brain changes in reaction to direct instruction of cursive handwriting. So, quite frankly, the earlier children master handwriting, the more likely they're going to succeed in school. And when we talk about statewide standards, the emphasis and expectations placed on classroom note taking and expository writing in grades K through 5, that emphasis is greater than ever before. Now, research from psychology professor Karen James of Indiana University evaluated children who hadn't yet learned to read or write, and her study was published in Trends in Neurosciences and Education. And in her study, she asked children to reproduce a single letter by typing it, drawing it on plain paper, or just tracing it over a dotted outline. And then the researchers put the children into a functional MRI brain scanner, and they had the students study the images again. And while reviewing the image, scans showed that students who drew the letters activated 3 distinct areas of their brain. But children who had traced or typed the letter didn't experience the same brain effect. So, what is one of the most important components of teaching students to read? Something we all focus on a lot, especially in the earlier grades. It's fluency. And just as fluency in reading frees the mind of the reader and enhances comprehension, fluency in cursive handwriting allows for a faster rate of composition. If handwriting is effortless, then the mind is going to be able to focus more fully on the task at hand. When handwriting is a struggle, valuable brain energy is taken away from the writing process. And children not only learn to read more quickly when they first learn to write by hand, but they also remain better able to generate ideas and retain information. In other words, it's not just what we write that matters, but how we write that matters. And more research. Marie Clay, many of you may know her. She was a clinical psychologist and she developed the Reading Recovery Intervention Program. It started in New Zealand and then she expanded it worldwide. And she did tests on how students learn to master letters. And she found that if students were just given a model for a letter and asked to copy it, it took students 50 repetitions in order to master that letter. So then she took a group of students and she had teachers give verbal guidance with the model before asking children to copy it. And this drastically reduced the number of repetitions needed for children to master a letter. It went down to 10. And then she found with another study that if teacher modeling, along with helping students to learn those letter formation descriptions, that took that repetition number down to 4. It only took 4 repetitions for children to master a letter if students were able to describe how to form the letters for themselves while they were forming the letters. And Benson Handwriting is based on this research. Benson Handwriting's formation instructions are simple. They're easy for students to remember and they're very descriptive. So students are easily able to learn and apply. So as we talked about before, clear, consistent formation descriptions. All letters and numerals are made using 4 or 5 basic strokes or lines. Letters are also introduced based on formation. Starts very simple and moves to the more complex letter formations. We've made sure that you have appropriately sized writing lines with color guidelines based on the specific grade. We've integrated those language arts skills, and here's why that's so important. It's critical that handwriting instruction is integrated with phonics instruction. So as students learn how to write those letters, they should also be learning and practicing the sounds that the letters make. So requiring students to consistently practice forming those letters while connecting those letters to sounds will help embed those phonics concepts in their brains. So grade appropriate integrated language arts skills allow you as a teacher to provide relevant practice for your students. Language arts standards for the skills are covered and listed with each lesson in the teacher edition. And once students feel comfortable with those instructional routines, handwriting may become a part of your literacy centers, which will build independence and practice opportunities for your students. There's also self-assessment prompts in every lesson, which builds students' evaluation skills and independence. And of course, comprehensive teacher instructions following the principles of guided practice. Quality instruction in handwriting has been researched and studied around the world. And what all researchers agree on is that handwriting instruction should be explicit and systematic. We've heard those words a lot, right? Explicit and systematic. It's important that teachers' knowledge of handwriting development and instruction improves not only outcomes in handwriting, but in processes associated with compositional writing, such as in planning and composing and revising. And according to Graham, Harris, and Mason, who did a study in 2008, handwriting difficulties impede beginning writers in 4 different ways. So, of course, it decreases their legibility of their written product. It decreases the value in the form of grades attributed to writing, right? If it's messy and teachers can't read it, they're not always going to give the best grade. It is subjective in many ways. A decreased ability to hold thoughts in their working memory, because what are they doing? They're focusing on letter formation instead of writing down their thoughts. And then it also results in avoidance and total distaste for writing. The Digital Professional Development Resource provides important strategies and activities for developing and supporting specific handwriting skills. So, inside, you'll find those occupational therapy tips, such as the critically important how to hold a pencil, as well as little songs and finger plays or rhymes to support instruction. Now, children progress through various pre writing stages on their way to becoming writers. And each stage is critical in preparing children for the fine motor coordination necessary for handwriting success. So, listed below are the age appropriate activities and pre writing skills. So, being able to recognize those as being part of handwriting readiness is important to supporting students as they're moving their way towards fluent handwriting. So in age 3, students are often able to hold a fat pencil in a writing position. They can make squiggles resembling letters. They can maybe print a few recognizable letters, and they're going to attempt to write their names. At age 4, they may be able to hold a pencil with a tripod grasp, but their entire arm may move while they're writing. And they can copy a circle, sometimes a square. They can color with directions, and they print random, very random, irregular letters. Progressing to age 5, students generally can color within the lines. They can copy a simple shape, they can cut on the line and cut out simple shapes. And then at age 6, this is important. This is where their hand dominance is established. And they can use a tripod grasp to hold the pencil. Their wrist and fingers move while writing, but now their arm is able to be held still. And there's some reversals, but letters are still large and uneven. Okay, another handwriting readiness factor is, of course, auditory. So, in order to comprehend letter formation directions, children need to develop an understanding of directional terms. So, on page 4 of our PD resource, there are tips to help with that. So, for example, playing a game similar to Simon Says, where you're using the formation instructions in our Benson handwriting program, and you're also making sure that students are developing an understanding of directional terms. So you might play a game saying, Simon says skywrite, which means write the letters in the air, and slant down left. Or Simon says skywrite and slide left to right. Students also need to practice activities to determine their hand dominance and develop their fine motor skills. So, allowing children to depress the spray cap and put shaving cream on a desk or a table is important, and having them practice writing those shapes, those letters, those numbers in the shaving cream builds that muscle memory. You can also offer many opportunities for using scissors and increase the complexity of the shapes that they're cutting out over time, and provide stencils or templates for tracing. Now, those kinesthetic skills are so incredibly important to handwriting readiness, and the correct 3-finger pencil grip requires the use of those small muscles of the hand. Some of the ways that our PD resource details on how to build those muscles include providing opportunities for children to manipulate a variety of different sizes of pegs and pegboards and puzzles with pegs, or providing clay or Play Doh for molding into the shapes of various letters or numbers, and providing squeeze bottles or paint or glue, and have children form pictures and letters on papers. And then once dry, the students can trace with their fingers to create that muscle memory of the letter formation. Now, although handwriting is a fine motor movement, practicing those large body movements are super important. Those movements that cross the midline of the body, because they use both sides of the brain and they prepare children for handwriting instruction. So, having children move to music with scarves, making big motions that cross the body is important. Or have children make jumping jack movements with their arms only, or practice large arm circles with their arms outstretched at their sides. And pencil grasp. This is a key function that all students need to know how to do correctly. When it comes to how a child holds a pencil, there are definitely correct and incorrect grasps. The correct grasp is when the index finger and thumb hold the pencil against the middle finger. This results in more comfortable and efficient handwriting, because we all know incorrect grasps cause poor letter formation and it tires students. A student with a poor pencil grasp may benefit from using tools like a pencil grip, or from wrapping a rubber band around the ring finger and pinky to fold those against the hand. You can also teach the pinch and flip trick, and you can find that on YouTube as well. The student places the pencil with the writing end facing her and pinches the pencil between the thumb and index finger and then flips the pencil into the correct position. Sounds complex, but it's not. Watch a video and you'll easily get it. And it's important to even show students those videos. Now, visual discrimination, super important for students as well. It means students can recognize and reproduce various lines and shapes. There are tips for this on page 6 of the PD resource, and they include such ideas as using sand trays for children to practice lines and shapes, and using Venn diagrams to analyze different attributes of objects, and sorting objects by color, size, or shape. A really popular one is to have children sort plastic letters by their attributes, such as tall or short, capital, lowercase, straight lines, curved lines. Very important to form that visual discrimination so that they will pay attention to those formation instructions and be able to write legibly. Okay. Also, on page 4 of the Professional Development Guide, you'll find important guidelines for assessive handwriting readiness. You'll note that we've created a class rubric that assesses all students on one page, and it provides a very handy class snapshot for assessing student readiness. Students are assessed on such criteria as hand dominance, crossing the midline, eye-hand coordination, pencil grasp, observing same and different characteristics of letters, knowledge of basic shapes, alphabet knowledge, posture, and interest in handwriting. Page 11 of the Professional Development Resource details common handwriting issues and tips for correcting. For example, let's say the student moves the entire arm while they're writing. A good idea is to have the student lie on a hard surface, floor, to write. And this will mean that their weight will be placed on their arms, and this will keep the arm of the writing hand stabilized. Writing on a more vertical surface is also helpful, like a chalkboard or a whiteboard. Other issues. Oftentimes, students do not leave space between their words. Have students create spaceman or space kids using craft discs. They can decorate those and make those fun and use as a spacer to measure the space between words so they know where to begin writing the next word. Or let's say we all have had these students. If a student pushes down too hard when writing and they're constantly breaking their pencil lead or they're tearing their paper, you can provide pencil-sized markers for children to use, and these require less pressure, right? Or have students use a mechanical pencil where the lead will break if too much pressure is applied, and eventually they'll learn how much pressure they should use. To build children's awareness of different degrees of pressure and the result, you could also place children's paper on top of styrofoam. So too much pressure is going to cause that pencil to go through the paper and into the styrofoam. It will annoy the students and eventually they'll start paying attention to how much pressure they're applying. Another common problem is that the student writes too softly. So offer a pencil with number 1 lead, which is way softer and darker than the traditional number 2 pencil. You could also provide pencil-sized markers that will mark with less pressure as well. So as you've seen, I'm sure in your classrooms over the year, their students really do struggle with handwriting. And what we've learned through research is that there's also a condition called dysgraphia, which is a pretty serious condition, and it's a sign or it's a reason as to why they're struggling so much with their handwriting. But our PD guide really provides good resources to help fight the struggles that students experience that have dysgraphia. So, what is exactly dysgraphia? Well, it's a learning disability and it affects students' writing abilities, and it can manifest itself as difficulties with spelling, poor handwriting, and trouble just getting their thoughts down on paper. And this learning disability makes it difficult to write and think at the same time. So, some of the signs of that are a cramped grip. So, students will often say they have a sore hand and they have a lot of tiredness with their hands when they're writing. They might have difficulty spacing things out on paper or within margins. So it's called poor spatial planning. There on the right, you can see an example of that. We've seen that many times in our classrooms. They have frequent erasing, so much to the point that they actually put their holes in the paper. They have inconsistency in letter and word spacing. They have poor spelling, unfinished words, missing words or letters that are not consistent. They have an unusual wrist or body or paper position while writing. It looks different than most students. So some ideas and tips are found on page 14 of our PD resource. Additional tips will include such as creating bumpy paper with glue. And by tracing the top and bottom line of the paper, your students, after that dries, of course, your student's pencil will bump up against those lines as he or she writes. So it will allow your student to form the letters in the correct spacing. Okay. Also, we talked about this before, using a student-created spaceman or space kid with a popsicle stick will help correct those spacing issues between words. And that's also noted in page 14. And there's a lot more ideas and tips to help students with dysgraphia, that very serious learning disability, as well, in the professional development guide. So I just ask that you please look at those as well. Additional tips. Fill a freezer-sized Ziploc bag with a couple dollops of colored hair gel. Students love this one. You can also use clear hair gel and add food coloring or glitter, whatever your choice is. But make sure you seal it tightly. Sometimes you want to double bag it, or you can just tape over the top to make sure it stays closed. But student places the bag on a table and they smooth it out until it's flat. And then you can ask your student to use a finger or the eraser end of a pencil to practice writing words or letters or numbers. And the resistance of that hair gel will help the students feel how the letters should be formed. Let's say a student has trouble making her letters the correct size. For example, she may write dogs with a mix of lowercase and capital letters. So on page 14 of the PD resource, it shows how to combat that. This activity uses hand positions to help students understand letter size. So you would start up with the word boy to practice for your whole group, your whole class. So for tall letters like B, students would point thumbs up to the sky. For small letters like O, students would make hands parallel to the ground to indicate the grass. And for descending letters like Y, students would point her thumb down for the ground. So we would call that activity sky, grass, ground activity. Of course, as we said before, there's many occupational therapy tips are provided in the professional development resource, but they're also provided in most lessons within the teacher guide. Every student book includes foundational handwriting skills to ensure students a successful start. Directions are provided in regards to proper posture, all important feet placement, paper orientation on the desk, and correct pencil grip. Students need these foundational handwriting skills to ensure a successful start. Individual student handwriting evaluations and quick whole class assessment rubrics are also available as a separate resource. And remember, with just a few minutes each day, your students' letter formation skills can and will improve, leading to positive outcomes for overall literacy development. We look forward to working with you and providing additional instruction and support as you begin to implement Benson handwriting in your classroom. Thank you for being a great teacher.